seated. Cute cares. All right. So, hi everyone. Thanks for being here. I know that there are a few more people who are planning to come as soon as they're able. Lots of different things going on right now, as always. Hi, folks. Feel free to join the. Yeah.
Sure.
Ah. Oh, choking. My name is Angela Arsenault, and I am co-chair of the Women's Caucus.
Oh, Jabin is my brother, also co-chair.
And I wonder if, well, given the time, we do have floor starting at 1 today, so I think we should really probably be wrapped up fully by 12:55. So that sounds fair. 12:50. And we are recording this meeting. We don't record all of our meetings, but we think there is a particular interest around this topic, and we'll be sharing the recording. So, do you want to just get started, or I feel bad like being the only people introduce ourselves, but
I think we should launch right in. I know there's a couple of folks who will trickle in. There's a lot going on today at noon, which is probably why we're recording. So a lot of folks who are interested in the update, but not everybody can be here at lunch. But yeah.
Okay. So I don't have an order in mind, but I would like an order of speakers. You do, but I'd love to eat. Yeah, we'll start with Representative Emmons, Chair Emmons. Yeah, coming to the little table, big seat. I know.
Usually I'm sitting over there.
You can sit anywhere you like.
I mean, I wonder if you just have a.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think folks should feel free to come up.
Yeah,
just because
we did not configure the room this way, so
there's DOC and BGS, and it might be better to have everybody just kind of sit around.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
That would be easier.
Yeah, please.
So we're gonna. Yeah, are you free? Yeah, as long as the chair lets me out. But yeah, I'm trying.
But I could start.
Well, yeah.
And then we've got correct.
Understood.
But I'm Alice Emmons, representative from Springfield and chair of the House Corrections and Institutions Committee. We've been working on trying to replace the women's correctional facility. Where we started, which is 2018, 2019, started way before. And right now we have about $15–16 million put aside for going forward with the women's replacement. Up to this point, we have been working with BGS, Buildings and General Services, and corrections as well. But mostly BGS, because the first thing you need is land. Can't do anything unless people plan. So we said to BGS a few years ago, look at state-owned land first. If there's no possibilities of any state-owned land, then look to see what's out there for purchase. So last year, I think it was last year, we've been working with some state-owned land that we own in Essex. There's 2 separate parcels there. And this is land that's owned by AOT, Agency of Transportation, and it was originally intended for the Cirque Highway. So right now, and I know BGS is going to get into this more, and possibly GOC, but right now we're working with the community of Essex, as there needs to be some updated change of zoning to allow a correctional facility to be placed on either one of these parcels. So yeah, we're waiting for that to get resolved. There's no way we can go forward with any design documents at this point, really. We have some really broad conceptions, but there's nothing definite in terms of design documents. Because you need to know what land, what property you're dealing with. That will then determine, you need a certain amount of acreage, you need to know the topography of the land, you need to do some perk testing. You need to know where your infrastructure is going to come in for water and sewer and power. And you can't do any of those design documents until you actually have the land. So that's where we are at this point. And there's no money in the capital bill for the next we do a 2-year capital bill. We're at the beginning of the biennium to do our first run through of a 2-year budget. We do have budget adjustment process coming next year in January that we can move money around. But at this point, there's no money for either year for the women's facility. We have 15 to 16 million already put aside, and that will get us definitely through design documents. So we'll have a better idea next year, and if it's a go ahead, we'll be finding more money to put into it. So that's where we are at this point. So.
Just a quick clarifying question. So, are you saying that the design could cost 15 to 16 million?
It depends in terms of what is needed on the land and the design of the building. I don't anticipate it would be as high as 15 million, but the construction and the building of the facility is much, much more than 15.
Of course, right.
So we need to start putting money aside because there's no way our state bonding capacity or our general fund can absorb in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years the money that's going to be needed to build it, because we are in the tens of millions to build.
In that vein, I got to visit and I talked to you about this, the facility, the reentry facility in Maine. And I just think it looks like a very nice design. And I just wonder if we could just buy the plans from that rather than have to spend so many millions. It's just a flat.
Depends on the land. It depends on the land. And it also depends on the other infrastructure that would be needed for the incarcerated piece as well. And that's a question for PGS as well as the DOC. It all depends how the lay of the land is and how you're going to place those buildings on the land and what's needed.
So it sounds like
And also code for Vermont could be very different. The code in Maine, and you also have to work with the national correctional standards as well.
So is that a good segue? Okay.
It's a great segue, and I think, Alice, thank you for summarizing our presentation for us. That was very thoughtful. I'm Kristen Calvert, Deputy Commissioner of Corrections. I'm probably new to a lot of folks here, but I've been with DOC for 20 years in this role since June. So part of this project the entire time as a financial director for and more on the fringe. Haley pulled up some slides. They're very brief, but do speak to what Alice spoke about and may answer some of your questions about the goal of this new facility. So just to reorient you to the conditions of the current facility in Chittenden, and to highlight, it's not a great welcoming environment. It's not therapeutic. It also wasn't designed or intended for long-term habitation or for women when it was built a number of years ago. More pictures of inside Chittenden. You'll notice lack of windows, just aging infrastructure in general. Really kind of looks like a classic correctional facility and nothing therapeutic like we're heading towards. This is an example of a more evidence-based design of a rehabilitative, more therapeutic, trauma-informed space, and really photographs for you what we're working towards. I think the next one, thank you, are Maine specifically, so you might find these familiar and do really speak to what we're looking to build and modeled after. And same with the inside. So the interior look looks much friendlier, nicer furniture, carpet, windows, really nice, light, bright space, more conducive to rehabilitation. for the women. River Valley Therapeutic Residence. So this already exists and I think is a good example of what is achievable for DOC. Again, it doesn't look like a residential facility, something that's more rehabilitative and focused on therapeutic model and programming. This is an interior view of that facility, more windows, again, better furniture. You'll notice that small round window just gives us better visual of each room. So kind of speaks to the correctional environment in a way, but not as harsh as the previous photos I used. So
I think it's important for folks to realize this facility right here, River Valley Therapeutic, we already have this up and operating. It is where the Woodside facility used to be. This is for secure residential for our mental health folks who need a step down from the state hospital. And this opened up a few years ago. And there's 16 beds in there, secure residential, and it's through the Department of Mental Health.
So this is the outside of that facility. It looks much nicer, garden space, murals. You don't see any barbed wire, things you would typically see within our system. And then just good outdoor space for recreation and outdoor time. So for the site visits, we started with over 150 sites that we were considering state-owned property, amongst others. A little diagram of sort of where the top 4 are that we narrowed down. And then now we're focused in on 2 sites in Essex. Site 1, this is the Susie Wilson area that I think Alice spoke to. I'm geographically challenged, so, and if you can make more sense of this than me, that's wonderful. Some areas surrounding that are light industrial areas. There's a residential abutment, and then some light commercial on the top side. Site 1, again, this just gives you a different look, and that round circle that you see is a guesstimate of where the facility would be if we were to go with this site. And another look at the site, how I believe, and I'll invite BGS to interject if I'm not correct here, but this has the zoning stands today, half industrial and medium density residential. And then the floodplain is also something we'll have to consider when actually building the facility once we narrow down the site. This is site 2. This is River Road. There's a large ECI, is a ECI earthworks there. A more industrial type setting than the previous one. Again, an estimate of where the facility might be if we were to choose this site in that circle on the top. And the zoning as it exists today with industrial and low density residential, and then the floodplain. The timeline, Alice started on this path, August 2024. We attempted to submit zoning amendment to the town of Essex to remove the corrections overlay. So we could further explore the other sites or both sites on the property. Currently in this fall of 2024 and spring of 2025, we're still in discussion with Essex and residents to understand what information they need from us to make their decisions. I think we're still pending receipt of written questions from the committee so that we can again follow up so everyone has everything in writing. And then going forward is just continued permitting, review process, design, and all of that work, construction. And finally, we want to highlight community investments that we have now, and then just to frame out where we're spending our money while this is being built, because I think there is an argument that we should defer funding. But by the time this facility is built, we will have spent more in community funding than the facility will have cost in total. So that is parallel work that's happening. Community justice centers, the Vermont network is a very good partner with us, providing programming within the facilities. Certainly Vermont Works for Women, Love Center, Merchant Connections, and others.
Can you take a little more time to walk us through this?
Which part? This one here?
Yeah.
Okay, so $11 million is our annual investment in community investments right now. That includes transitional housing programming, community justice centers, Turning Point Center, the opioid fund. Those grants were recently for bringing coaches into the facilities and then also expanding to our probation and parole site, so from the field side. Our current providers at Chittenden include Lund Kids Apart program, Vermont Works for Women, Mercy Connections, and the Vermont Network running the Divas program in there. And then we also work with the network closely on the statewide programming. And then about $250,000 for Jenna's Promise. They currently have, I think, 4 to 6 folks that are in DOC supervision of some kind in their programming. And again, that's a kind of wraparound service type model where it's transitional housing, vocational training, and other therapeutic services.
And so on an annual basis, you're spending 11 million?
Correct.
And yeah, that's really helpful to understand this. That last sentence, can you explain the timeline you're talking about?
Sure. So, I mean, projected timeline of probably another 10 years or so, 10 years plus. And then if you want to factor in years that we've already spent working on the project, the total project cost of the facility will be less than the total amount of community investments that we've spent in that same time period. So we're really spending in parallel more in the community in preventative measures and therapeutic measures and programming than the cost of the new facility to build.
Okay, so you're just saying that during the years that you anticipate planning and setting aside money well, apparently not every year, but setting aside over that time for the construction, that there is a very similar amount during that period of time spent on the services.
Yes.
Interesting.
Just to follow up on that, so that statement assumes that these services won't be necessary once there's a new facility.
No, they will still be very necessary. And I imagine we would expand on many of the things, especially when you consider the reentry side of the facility.
And then just one more clarifying point. I think as I'm reading it, the $714,516 to CRCF providers is of this list the only total that's targeted to justice involved women. Is that true? Or is this
and Jenna's Promise, also the opioid center funds right above that also have some targeted funds for Chittenden. Even the justice centers and transitional housing all support that. So all of them support Chittenden, but that directly alone is what is spent there.
Right. Yeah. And a better way to phrase the question, I guess, is understanding that they all do support residents at CRCF. That line is the one that's specific to CRCF. Correct. The others, that those totals besides that line represent an overall investment
And Jenna's Promise as well.
And Jen.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
So I want to be sure I heard this right. So these things will continue after and then how much money did these people actually ask for that they really needed to meet the need?
That's a great question. I can't answer. A lot of them have been in the works with us for so long. The negotiation or RFP process would have been several years ago at this point. We can look into some of them, certainly.
I can answer part of that, my representative, and say that, for example, with the Lund Kids Apart program, we know that, and we've talked about this in Chair Emmons's committee this year, that there was a portion of their funding that was not met by the Department of Corrections to provide the Kids Apart programming inside the facility. So this year, we are asking the House Appropriations Committee to look at justice reinvestment funding to fully fund that program and expand it to the men's facility as well. So I think what you'll see here is not only are we funding at this level historically, but we're also looking for avenues to increase our funding for community-based services. Because we hear from some folks in the community, I think some who are on this call, that the Department of Corrections doesn't invest in community services. So we thought it was important just to make sure that folks know that we do include millions of dollars in our budget every year for these critical services.
I thank you for saying that. I very much appreciate this slide and your efforts. But without seeing how much these organizations actually think they need versus what the funding is, that's a big piece of information that I need to have to be able to evaluate anything.
And we're going to have a meeting with service providers on April 10th to get at some of those questions.
Okay.
Also, they are not here today because they're in the middle of a full day event themselves. So
Thank you.
we're sort of separating this conversation into focusing on the facility and then focusing on services. But while you guys are presenting, it's really helpful to see some of these numbers. You understand the breadth that those. I would just also acknowledge that while we tend to focus on justice involved women, we also know that a lot of these services are badly needed, or relatively similar services are also sorely needed in the men's population. Thanks.
That's it for us unless you have any other questions. But we'll hang out while BGS.
Yeah, go ahead. I think my.
Joe Agent, Director for Design Construction for the General Services. I think the commissioner said all, once you have additional questions on the site, the zoning or anything like that, you're going to have.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Wanda Pennell, Commissioner of UBS. I think it would be beneficial for the group to understand the current request that we have with Essex, then that takes us next to the actual building permit.
So what we're doing with Essex right now is a change in use because of the way the properties are zoned, whether it's site 1 or site 2. If they're not zoned for a correctional facility. In Essex, they have an overlay for a correctional facility, and that was at our Woodside site. It is still there because of the facility that we have there, but we're either asking for that to be extended or that we are zoned accordingly so that we can go there. So once that zoning is resolved, if it's in the favor of having a facility, then we'll go through the whole permitting process with them and anything else that we have to do to design everything else and select a site. So when selecting a site, it is not just about the zoning, but it's also on both sites, there are steep hills to get to the location. And also water, sewer, all your utilities to get you there. All that comes into selecting a site along with the zone. So that's the phases that we'll be going through.
And another thing, I think Representative Emmons spoke to this, but I think we could express some of our best practices. One of the members said, are you spending $15 million on designing this building? And we do have guidelines on a percentage that maybe you could just do give them an idea that when we have a total cost of a project, there's a percentage that we use that kind of gives us an idea of what it's actually going to cost to do architectural designs, final designs, all of the details. And it is more than you would think. So I think it would be great if you could share that.
Typically what you're looking at is about 10% of your construction cost is going to your design, which includes your permitting and everything that we have to do, the testing that's required to get you into all of your permits and whether or not the land is actually flushing to build on. So, it's not always that as your project gets larger, that percentage reduces. So, we're anywhere on the size of the project could be around from 8 to 15%. Again, it depends on what your property looks like also. Steep site requires more design for foundations, less that was a flat site.
Thanks.
I'll jump in. I'm just curious, few things. One question that popped into my mind, are either of these sites, I'm imagining one maybe is and the other may not, are they within, are they serviced by town infrastructure, water, sewer?
Both of them are relatively close enough that to connect onto, yes.
Okay. And you mentioned, you said Essex, in Essex, there's this overlay, meaning that the town of Essex has that in their.
In their zoning, they have what's called the correctional facility overlay.
Okay.
That is that area where the Woodside facility was, where the new mental health facility is. And so their zoning that's the only location where you can have a correctional facility. Thus, we're asking.
Yeah.
Change.
So where does that request stand currently?
It is with the town right now.
What's the vibe?
Yeah.
If I could jump in, I think you can explain this. They actually just reorganized. So we had spoken and met with them at the end of last year. And I think the team can probably articulate this better than me, but they sort of reset their planning committee, and they've just done that. They have reached out to us and said they're evaluating and they'll be in contact. But I think they've been going through a little bit of an organizational change transition. I can't speak directly on their behalf, but they are in communication with us. And Emily, if you know more.
Yeah, they have been engaging. I think the meeting is today.
Oh.
That they are meeting and that they're putting together some questions for us that we'll look forward to receiving and responding to. So they are, it does look like they're taking it up.
Yeah, I mean, they've been actively working with us, which is the most important. Yeah.
Another design question. You know, of course, this question has been asked and answered. I'll acknowledge that. Not today, but I want to bring up again questions about the design phase of the facility, and this is for DOC as well, of course, and how you're incorporating the perceived need, you know, numbers, the demand for the facility. I'm gonna not say bed count. But just wondering at this phase, understanding that there are several phases to come, how you're thinking about that, what you're using, what sort of data you're using to inform that thinking, how, if at all, it factors into the conversations that the town of Essex might be having, those sorts of things.
So if I can kind of frame that a little bit, I think it's important for DOC to talk about types of beds, because we get wrapped around the number of beds. And I think it's really, really important to understand what the beds are used for. Because that makes a difference in terms of how you understand all the moving pieces. Just want to put that out there, not get hung up on a number.
I don't recall if we landed on a total bed count, but you know, there is an appetite to talk about the reentry facility versus the secure facility. And if we're, you know, overloading the secure facility and only allowing a few beds, you know, we've been in discussions about criteria for the reentry facility versus the secure side.
Can I
we're
ask
open
you
to-
to say more, just for everyone, and perhaps talk a little bit about the differences between the two?
Sure. So the secure facility would be a pretty classic, you know, you don't get to go out into the community. It's more of a traditional secure facility setting in the new design, of course. The reentry side, folks are allowed to leave for the day, maybe go to employment or a community-based appointment and return. So those are the significant differences in the two. And I think the discussions around maybe building out the reentry side more than the security side, we're open to continuing that conversation. It would take some changes to Title 24, I believe, in those committees of jurisdiction. But we're still continuing those conversations, and it comes up frequently in our women's stakeholder meetings that are every other month, I believe, every month about. So nothing has been determined yet on those. Discussions are continuing to happen, and we're open to them.
And do you mind if I jump in? So,
Commissioner Demo.
yeah, hi. I think this is where we spend a lot of time talking about the size of the facilities and what types of beds, to the chair's point. So the basic facts are this: the facility, as we're envisioning it, will be about 15 to 20% smaller than CRCF in terms of total number of beds. And I think it's important to remember that the Department of Corrections does not decide or have any control over the number of people who come to our facilities. This body, in fact, is the largest influencer of that decision. And then that's interpreted by the courts and prosecutors and the judicial process. So when, you know, laws change and it becomes easier for people to be sent to jail, then our numbers tend to go up. In fact, we're seeing that right now, particularly in our women's population. Today it's about 130 folks, and the chair would remind us that for most of my tenure, it's been about 100. So we're pretty sizably increasing over where we've been over the last few years.
Are those numbers increasing due to, are those sentenced?
Largely increasing due to the detainee population, which is now about 50% of our total female population, about a third of our total prison population overall. So for us as administrators of this system, we are instructed under law to administer the system safely, to keep people healthy and safe while they're in our custody, help them when they get back to the communities. And I think there's this perception that if we just limit the size of the facility, then we can't put more people there. And that has never, ever been the case. We just keep sending people, but to smaller facilities, and now they're stacked on top of each other. We have overcrowding issues, or we have to send people out of state, which is something that we do for the men's population right now. So I want to be very sensitive to this conversation about bed count and bed size, and we should try to keep it as small as possible. That's actually, I think, more dangerous for the state than right sizing the facility. The chair mentioned that there's correctional standards. And the standard is that you have between 15 and 20% vacancy space in your facilities at all times so that you can flex folks around. System-wide, today we're at 135% of our system. We're supposed to have 15 to 20%, slack space on the top, and we're at 35% over our total. At the women's facility, we do have some of that slack space right now because the total bed count at Chittenden is about 175. We're at 130, so we do have that slack. Problem Chittenden is just not 90, so it doesn't work out that way. But as we look to the next facility, we want to make sure that the facility is the right size so that we don't have overcrowding issues and that we have the right types of beds, because that's the other piece is our population has changed dramatically. And the needs that the population has today are very different than they were 70 years ago when we were contemplating the facilities we have now. They need more complex care bed space. And usually what that means is you have a general population bed and the person also has a specialty bed. So now you have one person using two beds, even though they're not obviously staying in both beds at the same time. And so when we get tied around this concept of the precise number of beds, it actually misses the bigger picture of what is going to benefit the folks who live there the most. And so I just want to get those concepts out there because it's really important as we start to think about the design and the build of this facility or the two facilities that we get this right. And I think we've gotten it wrong a lot in the past. And so we're really trying to be more thoughtful this time in precisely figuring out where are we today? What do we expect is going to happen in the future? Because our population will continue to evolve and change over time. I think everybody hopes the population goes down, but right now that's not the case. And we can't plan for a facility to be smaller because of some future end state that we hope happens when people are suffering in these facilities today.
Yeah, thank you.
So just following up on that, thank you, Commissioner, for that. Just want to kind of bring it back a little bit to the current conditions and stuff and the need for the change. And for folks that don't know, I worked at the Women's Correctional Facility, or actually I still go there sometimes for my other job outside of this. And so I really believe in the need that we need a new facility. And so I want to, I appreciate the update that we're heading in the direction to get there. I also, it's still a ways out. And so wondering if you can give an update on kind of current conditions at the current facility, morale of staff. Hearing that the numbers are increasing, that's helpful, not great. But also, what are the opportunities that are being missed out on that could be happening if we were at the new facility? You know what I mean? So because I think that's an important picture for us to see, because that's the reality for the women that are going into the system right now. And nothing against, see, that's just the reality of the building that's there. I wonder if you could speak to that a bit.
Sure. Current conditions, I think back in Thanksgiving, we had a sewer backup in the Kids Apart programming area. I mean, that kills morale. It really dampens people's spirits when they can't have the visit that they were planned. I think it just really highlights that building, BGS is a great partner for us and they try very hard to follow through. But that building at this point is beyond a deferred maintenance plan. It's also getting more and more expensive for that plan. Folks are coming to work and they have to work in the same environment that folks live in, which is not great. And so there's definitely a lot of missed opportunity by not accelerating this process. And so that's why, we're here today. We continue to work with our stakeholder group to really keep this going. And we reach out to Essex frequently to be able to receive questions and be able to communicate with them what the ultimate goal of this project is, why it's so beneficial to staff, to folks that live with us, and to public safety in our communities. There was another part to your question towards the end, I think I missed.
Thinking it from both the staff and the
Yeah.
incarcerated individual perspective.
Yeah, we hear from our staff, they're involved in this process as well. They're really excited about it. We talked to the women at the facility that live there, and they're also, really in support of a new facility. I think it would just help them in general. You can't go to a facility like the one that we have and have any hope for, coming out and being successful. You kind of stay in that same kind of mindset of maybe addiction or maybe poor health or other, problems they came into us with. So we're really missing opportunity, I think, to not excel and fund this program, this project, to be able to make that right for the folks we serve. And, I know there's another vision for the future, and I think that's a beautiful one that we could eventually get to. But that's, maybe not achievable in our lifetime. And so we really have to focus on addressing what we have now. I think about the Norway model frequently. They've been working towards a different kind of correctional system. They started that process in the early 80s. And just recently, in the last 10 years, they've been able to achieve that. And so I don't want that for us. I don't want it to take, my lifetime to, have this facility to benefit folks and to really change, I think, society's perception about what corrections does. And we're working really hard to do that. And I invite you to look at our strategic plan to see those measurables and actions that we're taking to make that work.
I know we have to wrap up in just a minute. I guess I would love to just dig in a little bit deeper on that. So what are we doing if we're not expecting for 8 to 10 years for a new facility? What are we doing to correct some of the infrastructure issues at the current facility? And do we have the money we need for that? Doesn't seem like you can just keep deferring.
I might have that one to our partner at
I would just invite last comments from you there.
We just replaced the roof on the facility because we knew we're going to be there for X number of years. So building and general services is still expending our major maintenance funds to keep that building up. We're going through now and doing several items in there. So we know we're eventually leaving, but we still have to keep it up while we are still there.
Yeah, and it's about 3 to 4 million annually, if I'm not mistaken, for that deferred maintenance. At the moment, we are looking at a freezer replacement, which will cost about $16,000, we estimate, which is hard for the state to swallow, and we know we have this new facility on the horizon. But we still work with BGS very closely anytime anything comes up. So we're not just letting it go, but it's hard to understand, is this a major infrastructure problem, or is it, replacing locks or ceiling tiles or things of that nature? So we're still doing everything we can to keep the facility afloat.
I think one thing this is so minimal, but let me tell you, it has a big impact across the whole system of corrections in our facilities. One thing for Chittenden that a lot of the men don't have, facilities air conditioned. Our male facilities outside of Rutland is air conditioned. Our other male facilities are not. And it's quite common during the summer for the inside temperature to get up to 85, 90 degrees on those hot days. So at least it's small, but in the scheme of things for the residents who are living there, as well as for staff who are working there this summer, having an air conditioned facility compared to our other facilities in the system, it's a real plus. Because we're working to get air conditioning in our other facilities. That's a long process.
We really appreciate the update and for all of you coming today, and we'll share this with the rest of our caucus members, and we'll sort of revisit this topic from the services side in about a month, and welcome you guys to join us then when we hear more from our provider community. Final. Thank you. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Okay.